Hi, and welcome back to Live at FDIC, brought to you by Firehouse Subs, the firefighter-founded hot sub chain with a passion for hearty and flavorful food, heartfelt service, and public safety. Ready for your next mission? Firehouse Subs is offering firefighters the opportunity to continue serving after service now as restaurant owners. Learn more at www.firehousesubsfranchising.com. Well, again, welcome back to Live at FDIC. My name is Chris McClune. I'll be your host for this segment. And we have guests from Waterous. We have Jason Nowrocki and we have Greg Geske from Waterous. We're going to be talking about we're going to get behind the panel today, guys, is what we're going to be doing. But before we get too much into the different types of pumps and things of that nature, we were just talking outside. There are fire departments or fire companies that put a tremendous amount of thought into water flow and into their water flow operations and how the pump is going to fit into that. And there are other fire companies that don't put as much thought into that and, sort of view pumps as interchangeable. Sure. Almost. What I wanted to start off with was why treating a pump like a commodity is not such a hot idea when you're speccing a truck, and why it's critical to really put a lot of thought into that at the very start.
Sure. I guess I was in the fire service on a fire department for 35 years, and over those years I was involved in several different apparatus committees, and I guess being part of the apparatus committee, especially with the last apparatus that we bought, they're going to have that for 20, 25 years after. So in looking at that, really, you're leaving it. I've retired from the fire service now. I don't want them to give me a cursing because we've laid out that truck in a different way and stuff. So hopefully, if you're on a truck committee, if you're part of the apparatus committee or part of the people that buy the apparatus, you are looking at the pump because it's going to be on that apparatus for 20, 25 years. How big a pump you need, the certain things that you look into it, and Jason will go into it a little bit more, the differences between an end suction and a full body pump and their pluses and minuses. But again, because that pump's going to be there a long time, and a lot of times after you've left the fire service, you always want to leave it as good or better than when you started. So, looking into that and taking a little bit of time. We're always open as pump manufacturers to talk to the people, talk to the committees about the different pumps that are there, the ratings, the pluses and minuses. A lot of times now there's a bigger engine on it, so you can get the higher capacities. Capacities, first thing you start with. When I first started at Waterous, which was back in the early 90s, this most standard pump then was a 1,250 gallon per minute pump. Now it's a 1,500, and we have people that are buying apparatus with 2,000 and 2,250 gallon per minute pumps. So making that decision first, which puts you into the type of pump that you're going to put in there, and then going from there. So it's that first step, deciding how big it is, and accepting that responsibility that pump's going to be with your department on that apparatus for the next 20, 25 years.
So you mentioned that there are a number of different types of pumps. We're not just talking brand names. We're talking like specific types of pumps that are advantageous, as you said, for different types of reasons. It really does bring to light that it's more than just GPM. It's more than just a lot of people, or I shouldn't say a lot of people, but many fire departments do stop at the GPM stage. They're just like, okay, we want 2,000 GPM. Who's gonna build it for us, and then they run from there. And they may just decide to go with the same one all the time. But I wanted to get into some of these different types of pumps. So what is the difference between a full body and an end suction pump?
So a full body at Waterous should be our names for our product line would be like a CSU, which would be a centrifugal single stage pump. It's where we fully plumb it all the way out to the panel. It's got a dual eye impeller. There's two areas where the water enters the impeller. That's a full body. It's fully cast all the way out to the panel. It's what a lot of the nation's large cities run. And then we have what we call an end suction pump. It kind of looks like a snail. So it's a much smaller pump. It's where the OEM is going to have to fabricate out plumbing out to the panel on the intake and the discharge side. and then the reason we call it an end suction is it has one point of entry into the eye of the impeller for water. So two different pumps, both great pumps, great applications, but just like Greg said, there's definitely would need to be some thought when you're looking at specking out whether it be your aerial. Sometimes people might lean a little bit more towards a certain style of pump, like a volute pump or an end suction pump versus like a full body on a pumper. So. And then you have different ways of powering those. So we have, split shaft applications, PTO applications, etc. And then the different stages of the pumps as well. So you got single stage pumps, which typically you're going to max out in pressure around 300 psi. If you have a service area that is going to need higher pressures because you have maybe some taller buildings, or maybe out west where you have long runs between valleys, you're out in the desert and things like that, you're going to have longer hose lays. You're going to have to overcome that friction loss and have higher pressure. So we start adding stages to that. So you can get into a Waterous 2-stage pump where you could essentially flow 600 psi. You can even go higher if you get into a 3-stage pump. Like the high-rise pump, we add a third stage to that, and we do like 500 GPM at 700 psi. So they're really application specific, but it's good for the committees to be able to spend time on that. And we understand sometimes those conversations can be a little, I guess I wouldn't say scary. I don't know the right word for that, but kind of uncharted territory, and that's why we're all here to help. We're the subject matter experts, and we'd like to say that we consult fire departments, walk them through that conversation rather than sell them on it. So make sure that they feel confident with that decision that they're going to make, that they're choosing the correct style of pump for their application to ultimately serve their cities and their fire department.
I guess just kind of touch on that a little bit more too. It's the end suction pump and the full body pump have advantages and disadvantages of both. As Jason alluded to a little bit, with the end suction pump, the OEM is actually taking and putting on the discharge manifolds, which are typically stainless steel that they're fabricating to come out in the different areas, and also the intake plumbing that's going to that. So a lot of times they are able to plumb it to keep a little bit smaller pump house from front to rear, where the full body cast iron pump is kind of laid out that way. We do have some manifolds, some cast manifolds that are used on that. So sometimes the end suction will leave it to the OEM a little bit to fit it into the pump house with the other stuff that you are specifying in there. A downfall of an end suction pump is they will not draft as much or at a highest altitude as a dual-eyed impeller, because again, your drafting capability or that negative pressure is developed in the eye of the impeller. So if you have two eyes, it's able to do the same capacity at a higher altitude, or be able to do a higher lift at that point. So that's one advantage that the dual-eyed impeller has over the single-eyed impeller or the end suction pump. Another advantage that the dual-eyed impeller or the full body pump has, they tend to be a little bit quieter because you don't have as much what's called recirculation cavitation. All pumps are going to have a recirculation cavitation or a noise, and we're our worst enemies in the fire service. Our pumps get bigger and bigger. They're 1,500, 2,000 gallons per minute, but most of the time they don't flow that unless it's the annual service test. We're generally pulling up a couple inch and 3/4 lines off it, maybe flowing, a single line, 150 to 300 gallons per minute. So anytime that it's called the best efficiency point, or anytime that you flow less than 10% of that best efficiency point where it's designed for, you'll get recirculation cavitation. You get less of that on a dual-eyed impeller or full body pump.
Yeah. So. I know the not arguments, but the debates that I hear the most are single stage versus two stage. Talk to me a little bit about the advantages or disadvantages of them.
Sure.
Back in the 80s and 70s, 80s, and 90s, two-stage pumps might have been a little bit more popular because we didn't have the higher horsepower engines and things like that. There's been a bit of more of a trend to go towards single stage pumps over the last couple of years, just because of simplicity of operations. I guess would be kind of one way that people are shifting gears to the to the single stage pumps.
Yeah, and our original pumps, a lot of them were two-stage. They are more efficient over a broader range. And again, Jason brought up the simplicity. We don't have a transfer valve on a single-stage pump. The real reason we sell a lot of two-stage now is for that higher pressure. We can rate that up to 600 psi, so you can get push water higher in a building and overcoming that friction loss due to elevation. We also manufacture actually a three-stage pump that will get you 700 psi.
Okay.
It comes out of it, and it's used some of the bigger cities also to overcome that. So
we are seeing some trends with some larger agencies that are kind of forecasting. They have a lot of population boom, and they're starting to build some high rises. They might be in a single stage right now, but they're kind of forecasting their need for coverage for the next couple of years to go into a two-stage. So we are seeing a bit of a resurgence of two-stage users.
As we always say, you got to know your operational area, and choose the best one. Talk real quick about some different ways to drive a fire pump, what the differences are between them.
Certainly. I might have gotten a little ahead on that earlier, but so we have split shaft applications. We're actually splitting the drive line of that vehicle. When we go into pump gear, you're disengaging the rear drive line, and that's, a very common application. Doesn't have a whole lot of GPM limitations. In fact, we see very large industrial pumps, to include our Waterous CRU2 pump, that'll flow in excess of 4,000 GPM, all off of that drive line. So just really comes down to the departments, what they desire in terms of engaging that pump. So obviously when you're flowing a split shaft pump, you are not moving because you're disengaging that rear drive line. There's also PTO applications, and I'll kind of go back to my discussion further, where there used to be quite a bit of limitations, but there's been some work done in this area with the PTO manufacturers that have allowed for higher ratings to PTO power pumps. So when Greg mentioned 1250 used to kind of be the standard, he was kind of referring to split shaft. The standard with PTO pumps used to really be like 750. 1,000 would really have been stretching it. Up until the mid 2000s, we started to seeing some GPMs go up with the capabilities of handling of the PTO. So now it's not uncommon to see a PTO pump being auxiliary driven, ratings up to 1,500 GPM.
and the mini pumpers, of course, a lot of them go on the F550 size trucks. The PTO, for example, on that is you're only going to be able to drive a pump up to 500, 750, somewhere in that range. So we have people that want to put a 1250, 1500 on there. They do have to go split shaft driven, but it's really on the Allison transmissions and the PTOs that are on those that have allowed us to go up to the 1500 rating and get some bump and roll for that regard.
Yeah. Honestly, the pump doesn't really care how it's going to be driven, but it's going to demand torque and horsepower back on its weakest point, and that's always that connection between the transmission and the PTO.
Still expensive to replace a PTO, so you don't want to overload it, and that's one thing that we do in the calculations. When a fire department suggests or wants a PTO-driven pump, then the OEM usually works with us to tell them, how big a pump you can put in that PTO.
Well, if people are not able to make it to the show this week, how can they get in touch with you if they need more information on Waterous pumps and other products?
We are very happy to be able to help out. We actually pride ourselves in help guide people through those conversations. So the Waterous staff is always available. You go to our website, there's a list of contacts there. We also have quite a bit of literature that we've put out over the years. We're really trying hard to educate and arm the industry so that they can feel very confident in the decision that they're making. So we're putting a lot of shorts videos out there, 1 minute or shorter, and trying to just educate the masses. But by all means, feel free to call.
At waterousco.com, we have a segment called Waterous University, so you can learn more about the pumps that are out there, the different ways that you can drive them, and also the rating capacities and stuff too. So it's all there for you.
Perfect. Well, again, Greg and Jason, thank you very much for sitting down with me today to talk pumps. My thanks also to Firehouse Subs for sponsoring our podcast studio, as well as a lot of other things they did this week with the hands-on training lunches and other things that they've done for us. So again, this has been Chris McClune for Live at FDIC. Have a good one and stay safe. Thanks again, guys.
Thank
you.